September 15th, 2022. I'm lying in room 314 at Oak Ridge Medical Center, waking up from heart surgery that nearly killed me. The anesthesia is wearing off, but I keep my eyes closed, drifting in and out of consciousness. Through the fog, I hear hushed voices. My son Michael pacing the hallway, genuinely worried. And there's Victoria, my daughter-in-law, sitting in the corner with her sleek iPhone 13 Pro Max filming herself. Day 3 of freedom from the farm, she whispers to her camera. Robert's finally unconscious, so we can talk about upgrading our lives. I keep my eyes closed. Let her think I can't hear. She has no idea what she just triggered. Victoria Davis Miller married my son 3 years ago. From day one, she treated our family farm like it was a social disease. Our place sits on 200 acres in Oak Ridge, Iowa, about 45 minutes from Des Moines. It's been in the Miller family since 1922. The red barn is older than most buildings in town. The farmhouse was built in 1952, same year I was born. Nothing fancy, but it's home. Victoria saw it differently. This isn't a home, she told Michael after their first overnight visit. It's a poverty museum. She came from what she called old money. Her parents, William and Catherine Monroe, used to own a vineyard in Napa Valley. Lost everything in the 2008 crash. But Victoria never stopped acting like royalty. She drove a BMW X5 that cost more than what most folks in Oak Ridge made in a year, carried designer handbags that cost thousands, wore clothes that made my annual property tax bill look small. Meanwhile, I drove a 1989 Ford F-150 worth maybe $500 on a good day. I wore Carhartt work jackets that cost $89 each and lasted 20 years. My idea of fancy was dinner at the Oak Ridge Diner, where coffee still cost $1.50. The social media campaign started small. Instagram stories about visiting the countryside. Then TikTok videos about rural life adventures, always with that condescending smile like she was documenting a zoo exhibit. My father-in-law still uses a rotary phone, she'd giggle to her followers, literally from the Stone Age. The comments ate it up. Girl, you're slumming it. How do you survive without Starbucks? That's not rustic. That's just sep. 6 months ago, the tone shifted. Generational poverty is real, y'all. She posted filming our kitchen with its 1970s appliances. Some families just accept being left behind. Her follower count exploded. 45,000 people watching her mock our life. Brand partnerships started rolling in. Skincare companies, fashion brands. Everyone wanted to sponsor the authentic influencer showing real America. This is my content goldmine, she told Michael one night, thinking I couldn't hear from the living room. Poor farm life is so hot right now. Michael tried defending us. Dad built something here, Steph. This farm means everything to him. Built what? She laughed. A monument to refusing progress. Your dad's stuck in 1950 and he's trying to drag us down with him. But she was building quite the following with her farm-shaming content. Each video more brutal than the last. The wooden kitchen table, handmade by my grandfather, became furniture poverty. My collection of farming magazines became hoarding behavior. Our family photos on the mantle became a shrine to failure. The breaking point came in August. Victoria filmed herself in our living room, speaking directly to the camera. I've been documenting generational poverty for months now, she said, panning across our furniture. This is what happens when families refuse to evolve. Look at this place. Everything's falling apart. The carpet's from 1985. The couch has permanent body impressions. This isn't humble living. It's giving up. She zoomed in on my father's purple heart displayed in a simple frame on the bookshelf. Even their war memorabilia is bargain basement, she smirked. My followers deserve to see authentic wealth, not this hillbilly cosplay. 2.3 million views, 47,000 shares. The comments section exploded with people either defending us or joining her mockery. Local news picked it up. Iowa farm family becomes unlikely social media stars. That's when I knew she was planning something bigger. Something that would change our lives forever. But she had no idea I was already 3 steps ahead. The cruelest conversation happened on September 18th, 3 days after my surgery. I was lying in that hospital bed, machines beeping around me, when I heard Victoria's phone ring. She answered thinking I was still out cold from medication. thought she could speak freely. Hi, this is Victoria Miller calling about the property listing we discussed. Property listing. My blood pressure monitor started climbing. Yes, the 200-acre farm on Meadowbrook Road. My father-in-law is incapacitated. Heart surgery complications. We need to move quickly while he can't interfere. I grabbed my phone from the bedside table, hit record, and kept my eyes closed. The asking price. Well, the property appraiser said $920,000 for the whole package. Land, house, outbuildings. There was a pause. I know it seems low, but honestly, this place represents everything backward about America. Old farmers hoarding land while young families struggle. The realtor must have asked about me specifically. Robert Miller, he's 68. No business sense whatsoever. Been farming the same plots for 40 years, like it's still 1950. No modernization, no efficiency. The man still handwrites his accounting in ledger books. Can you believe that? She was pacing now. I could hear her heels clicking on the hospital floor. Listen, between you and me, I'm doing society a favor getting this developed. The town needs progress, not some stubborn old man's dirt farming museum. My husband's too sentimental to see it, but Robert's basically holding back the entire community. The realtor said something about market timing. Oh, the timing is perfect. Robert will be in recovery for weeks, maybe months. And honestly, at his age with his health problems, he might not be making decisions much longer anyway. His son Michael has legal power of attorney. I just need to convince him that selling is the compassionate choice. My heart rate spiked. The monitors would be wondering why. Michael still has these romantic ideas about family legacy and honoring his father. But I've been working on him, showing him what we could do with $920,000. A nice house in Des Moines, maybe even Omaha, somewhere civilized. She paused and I heard her typing on her phone. You know what the funniest part is? Robert thinks he's some kind of successful businessman. The man drives a truck older than my little sister, wears the same 3 flannel shirts year-round, lives like he's afraid to spend a dime. If that's success, I'll take failure any day. The realtor must have asked about neighborhood interest. The neighbors will thank us. Everyone's tired of looking at that eyesore. Peeling paint, broken fencing, rusty equipment scattered everywhere. It's dragging down property values for miles. I kept recording, fingers trembling slightly as my blood boiled. Not because she was wrong about the appearance. Maintaining the old farmhouse's historical character was intentional, but because her assessment of my business acumen couldn't have been further from the truth. Victoria continued her character assassination. We're thinking we could list it publicly next week. Michael's coming around to the idea. He just needs a gentle push. Once his father signs the final papers, or if he's not able to, we can move forward. Another pause as she listened. Power of attorney, yes, Michael has it for healthcare decisions. We'd need to get it expanded for financial decisions. His father's hardly in a state to object right now. What she didn't know was that I'd updated my will and power of attorney last year. Michael had limited healthcare decisions only with strict limitations on property. James Peterson, my attorney for 30 years, held the financial power of attorney. Victoria had either been misinformed or was deliberately lying to push the sale through. Great, I'll be in touch once we have the paperwork sorted, she concluded. The sooner we can offload this ancient burden, the better. She hung up, and I heard her return to her seat, the faint sound of her thumbs tapping on her phone screen. Probably posting another update about rural living while plotting to sell my legacy from under me. I kept my breathing steady, my eyes closed, and my rage contained. In that moment, lying in a hospital bed with sutures still fresh on my chest, I made a decision. Victoria Monroe Miller would learn exactly what kind of businessman I really was. The hard way. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Michael drove me home, fussing over me the whole time. Victoria stayed behind to take care of some things in town. The minute we pulled up to the farmhouse, I noticed changes. New curtains in the windows. Some of my furniture rearranged or missing entirely. A stack of glossy design magazines on the kitchen counter. Your wife's been busy, I remarked, keeping my voice neutral. Michael looked uncomfortable. She thought brightening the place up might help with your recovery. Is that what she thought? I walked slowly to my office, only to find it had been converted into what Victoria probably called a meditation space. My desk was gone, replaced by a yoga mat and some overpriced pillows. Dad, I'm sorry. Victoria thought you wouldn't be using the office during the recovery. So I held up a hand. Where are my files, my ledgers? In boxes in the barn. I made sure they weren't thrown out. Thank God for small mercies. Help me out there, will you? Michael looked uncertain. Dad, you just had heart surgery. You should be resting. Fresh air and a short walk will do me good. Doctor's orders. The barn was one place Victoria hadn't gotten her hands on yet. Too dirty, too authentic for her carefully curated social media aesthetic. My old desk had been relegated here along with filing cabinets and boxes of farm records going back decades. Michael helped me settle at the desk, then went to make us coffee. As soon as he left, I pulled out my cell phone and dialed a familiar number. James, it's Robert. We've got a situation. James Peterson and I had been friends since high school. He'd gone to law school while I took over the family farm. He'd handled my legal affairs for 30 years and knew every detail of my business operations. What's happening, Rob? Shouldn't you be resting after surgery? No rest for the weary. Victoria's making her move, trying to sell the farm while I'm down. I could almost hear James sitting up straighter in his leather chair. She can't do that without your signature. Not legally. She's working on Michael, claims he has power of attorney. She was talking to realtors while I was still in the hospital bed. The power of attorney is limited to healthcare decisions only as you requested. She's either confused or lying. I'm going with the latter. She's already redecorating the house. My office is now a meditation space. James chuckled despite the seriousness of the situation. What do you want to do? I think it's time we played our hand. She wants to sell my worthless farm for $920,000. Let's show her what it's really worth. All of it, James asked, knowing exactly what I meant. Every last acre, every company, every investment. I want it all laid out at the Oak Ridge Club Gala next month. Think you can arrange that? Consider it done. You're still planning to attend? Wouldn't miss it. Victoria's been dying to get an invitation for years. And Michael, what does he know? I sighed, watching through the barn window as my son walked back from the house, 2 mugs in his hands. Not enough, but he's a good man, James. Just blinded by love or whatever he feels for her. Do you want me to prepare the full disclosure documents? Yes, and I want you to look into something else too, the Monroes, William and Catherine, Victoria's parents. They lost their vineyard in 2008, but they must be doing something now. Find out what it is, who they work for. You think there's a connection? I think nothing happens by accident. Victoria targeted my son, targeted this farm. I want to know why. I'll get right on it. And Rob, take care of yourself. Don't let this stress set back your recovery. The only thing that would kill me now is letting Victoria win. I'll be fine. We ended the call just as Michael entered the barn. He handed me a steaming mug of coffee, concern etched on his face. Everything okay, Dad? You look intense. I softened my expression. Just glad to be home, son. Tell me, how are things really going with Victoria? You happy? He sat on an old wooden stool looking down at his coffee. She's different from when we first met. More focused on her social media stuff, always talking about upgrading, moving somewhere better. And what do you want? He looked around the barn at the weathered beams that had sheltered 5 generations of millers. I always thought I'd raise my kids here someday. Show them how to care for the land like you showed me. My heart ached for him. And does Victoria want children? She says maybe someday, when we're established, whatever that means. I nodded, letting the information sink in. Another piece of the puzzle. Son, I need you to trust me on something. Things might get complicated in the next few weeks. Victoria might get upset. But I need you to remember that everything I do is to protect this family and what we've built. Michael looked confused but nodded slowly. Of course, Dad. What's going on? Just some business matters that need addressing. Nothing for you to worry about right now. I sipped my coffee. By the way, the Oak Ridge Club Charity Gala is next month. I've arranged tickets for you and Victoria. His eyebrows shot up. Really, Victoria's been trying to get invited to that for years. She'll be thrilled. I thought she might be. Consider it a thank you for taking care of me after surgery. Michael smiled, relieved to see me being generous toward his wife, despite the obvious tension. If only he knew what was coming. Later that afternoon, after Michael had gone to town for groceries, I made another call from the privacy of the barn, this time to Eliza Donovan, president of the Oak Ridge Historical Society and an old family friend. Robert Miller. Should you be making calls? I heard you were at death's door. I chuckled. Reports of my demise have been greatly exaggerated, Eliza. I'm calling in that favor you owe me. The donation for the bell tower restoration, I knew that was too generous to be without strings. I need information about Oak Ridge Development Partners. Quietly, there was a pause on the line. The company trying to buy up all the farmland around the county line. What's your interest? My daughter-in-law is suddenly very interested in selling our farm. I want to know who's buying. I see. Eliza's voice turned serious. There are rumors, Robert. Big plans for that area. A resort complex, golf courses, luxury housing. They've been approaching all the landowners within a 10-mile radius of your property. And who's behind it? On paper, a consortium of investors from Chicago. But word is they're fronting for Horizon Global. The real money's coming from them. Horizon Global. The name struck a chord. A massive development company known for turning rural communities into playground resorts for the wealthy. How long has this been in the works? At least 2 years. They've been very quiet about it, buying through shell companies, keeping their name out of the local papers. 2 years. Right around the time Victoria started dating Michael. One more thing, Eliza. Do the names William and Catherine Monroe mean anything to you? Not offhand, should they? Former vineyard owners from Napa. Lost everything in 2008. They're Victoria's parents. I can ask around. The wine industry people all know each other. I'd appreciate that. And Eliza, not a word of this conversation to anyone. My lips are sealed, Robert. You take care now, and I expect to see you at the gala next month. Wouldn't miss it for the world. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, pieces starting to come together. Victoria hadn't married Michael for his charm. She'd married him for his land, or rather for what she thought was his inheritance. A key piece in a much larger development scheme. What she didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was that the Miller farm was just the tip of the iceberg, the public face of something much, much bigger. Over the next week, I played the part of the recovering patient. I let Victoria fuss and rearrange. I smiled weakly at her condescending comments about modernizing the farm. I pretended not to notice when she took Michael aside for hushed conversations that stopped the moment I entered a room. Meanwhile, James was doing his investigative work. The results came in pieces, each one more interesting than the last. William and Catherine Monroe. Victoria's parents both work for subsidiaries of Miller Agricultural Holdings, one of my companies. William is an operations manager at a distribution center, Catherine in accounting at a processing plant. They had no idea their employer was ultimately me. The corporate structure was intentionally complex with layers of holding companies between the workers and the owner. More interesting still, Victoria had worked for a real estate company for 6 months before meeting Michael. Not just any company, a small firm that had recently been acquired by an affiliate of Horizon Global. The same Horizon Global now trying to buy up all the farmland around Oak Ridge. Coincidence? I didn't believe in those. The final piece came from Eliza. Victoria's grandmother, Eleanor Monroe, was in assisted living at Willow Creek Seniors Home, a facility owned by Miller Healthcare Properties. Another of my companies 3 layers deep in the corporate structure. I'd been indirectly paying for Eleanor's care for years without knowing the connection. The picture was becoming clear. Victoria hadn't married Michael out of love. She'd been planted. A beautiful, charming woman tasked with getting access to a key piece of property needed for Horizon's development plans. Whether she'd been actively recruited or simply saw an opportunity and took it, the end goal was the same: get control of the Miller farm at a bargain price. What she and her Horizon handlers didn't know was that I owned not just the 200 acres of the original Miller farm, but nearly 5,000 acres surrounding it, acquired quietly over decades through various holding companies. Land that would be essential for any major development project. I also owned the water rights to half the county, several access roads that would be needed for construction, and had conservation easements on critical connecting properties. In short, without my cooperation, their grand development project was dead in the water. And Victoria had just made the mistake of making this very, very personal. 2 weeks after my surgery, strong enough to move around more freely, I made my first appearance in town. I drove my old Ford pickup to the Oak Ridge Diner, timing my arrival for the lunch rush. Just as I'd expected, the place fell silent when I walked in. Word had gotten around about Victoria's social media campaign. Some folks looked embarrassed, others curious, a few openly sympathetic. Marge, the owner, bustled over and gave me a gentle hug. "Robert Miller, you old goat. Heard you nearly checked out on us." "Can't get rid of me that easy, Marge." "Table for one." She led me to my usual booth by the window. "Coffee's on the house today. You're looking good for a man who had his chest cracked open." "Millers are tough stock." I settled in, nodding to the other patrons who were trying not to stare. "How's business?" "Can't complain, though we've had some city types coming through lately, asking questions about properties, taking pictures of the town. One fella spent 3 hours in that corner booth drawing up plans of some sort." "Interesting. Any idea who they were?" "Wow." Marge lowered her voice. "One left a business card, Horizon something or other, said they were planning big things for Oak Ridge. More jobs, more tourists." She frowned. "More trouble if you ask me." "Change is inevitable, Marge." "Maybe so, but I like Oak Ridge just fine the way it is." She straightened up. "Usual order. Please." As Marge walked away, Sheriff Dave Jackson slid into the booth across from me. We'd gone to school together, played football on the same high school team. "Heard you had a close call, Rob." "Nothing a Miller can't handle." He studied me for a moment. "Also heard your daughter-in-law's been turning you into some kind of internet celebrity." "Not in a flattering way." I shrugged. "Young folks in their social media. Can't say I understand it." "Cut the act, Rob. I've known you too long. You're planning something." I smiled slightly. "Just recovering from heart surgery, Dave. Doctor's orders." "Uh-huh." He leaned forward. "Look, as your friend, I'm telling you to be careful. Victoria's been making connections with some powerful people. Had lunch with Mayor Simmons last week. Been seen with those development types from Chicago." "I appreciate the concern. And as the sheriff, I'm telling you to keep it legal, whatever you're planning." I put a hand over my heart. "Would I do anything illegal?" "No, but you'd dance right up to the line and taunt those on the other side." He stood up. "Just watch yourself. These development people play rough when it's about money, and it's always about money." After lunch, I drove to James's law office. His secretary, Martha, who'd been with him for 30 years, gave me a warm smile and ushered me straight in. James rose from behind his desk, coming around to grip my shoulder carefully. "You're looking better." "How's the chest?" "Hurts when I laugh, so I've been avoiding humor." "Shouldn't be hard with your personality," he quipped, gesturing for me to sit. "I've got the full report on the Monroes and Horizon Global." He laid out a folder on his desk. "Victoria Monroe Miller, age 32, graduated from UC Berkeley with a degree in communications. Worked for 3 different marketing firms before landing at Prestige Properties in Chicago. That's the real estate firm with ties to Horizon." "Was she sent specifically to find me?" James shook his head. "Can't prove that, but the timeline is suspicious. She left Prestige, moved to Des Moines, and met Michael within 3 months. They were married 6 months after that. Fast work." "And the parents?" "William and Catherine Monroe lost the vineyard in 2008, filed for bankruptcy in 2009. William worked odd jobs until 2012 when he was hired by Central Iowa Distribution. Your company, though, 6 layers removed. Catherine joined Midwest Processing in 2014, also ultimately yours. They have no idea who signs their checks. The corporate structure is intentionally opaque as you designed it. On paper, they work for subsidiaries of AgriCorp Midwest, which is owned by Heartland Holdings, which is owned by Miller Agricultural Enterprise, which is owned by you." I nodded, satisfied. "And the grandmother, Eleanor Monroe, 84, in assisted living at Willow Creek since 2019. Monthly care costs covered by the Monroe family, which would be impossible on their salaries without external help." "So someone's been subsidizing them." "Horizon. Most likely, the funding is laundered through a family support charity that's a subsidiary of one of Horizon's foundations." I stood pacing the office despite the lingering soreness in my chest. "So Victoria is Horizon's way in. They support her family, probably pay her directly while she works on getting control of the farm." "That's my assessment." James leaned back in his chair. What's your play here, Rob? I smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. The Oak Ridge Club Charity Gala. I want everything ready by then. All the documents, all the evidence. And I want the corporate structure maps clear and visual showing exactly who owns what, including the Monroe's employment, especially that, in Eleanor's care facility. James looked troubled. Rob, this is going to destroy your family. Michael loves this woman, misguided as that may be. She's using my son James, using him to steal our legacy. Would you have me do nothing? Of course not. But there might be less nuclear options. I shook my head. She made it personal, mocked my father's Purple Heart on social media, called our family history a joke. She needs to learn that actions have consequences. James sighed, knowing better than to argue when I'd made up my mind. I'll have everything ready. But Rob, be careful. Heart surgery or not, you've got that look in your eye. What look is that? The one you had before you bought out Henderson Farms right from under Ronald Henderson's nose in '92. The one before you outmaneuvered that Chicago investment group in '05. The someone's about to learn a very expensive lesson look. I chuckled, then winced at the pain in my chest. They certainly are, old friend. They certainly are. The day of the Oak Ridge Club Charity Gala arrived. The event was held annually to raise money for local causes, this year focusing on rural education initiatives. It was the social highlight of the county, attended by everyone who was anyone within a 50-mile radius. Victoria had been beside herself with excitement when Michael told her they were invited. She'd immediately ordered a new dress, spent a fortune on hair and makeup appointments, and talked endlessly about networking opportunities with the right kind of people. What she didn't know was that I'd arranged for some very special guests to attend as well. William and Catherine Monroe had received surprise invitations as valued employees of AgriCorp Midwest, with no mention of my involvement. They'd be seated at a table near ours, but not with us. I wanted the revelation to come at precisely the right moment. James had delivered the final portfolio of documents the day before. Everything was in order, from corporate ownership diagrams to employment records to property deeds. The full extent of Miller Enterprises laid bare, ready to shatter Victoria's carefully constructed illusion. Michael helped me into my best suit, still a simple conservative cut that would look downright humble next to the designer outfits most attendees would wear. Victoria wore a form-fitting emerald dress that probably cost more than a month's mortgage payment, her hair and makeup flawless. "You clean up nice for an old farmer," she remarked as we prepared to leave her, tone making it clear she considered this a generous compliment. "Been to a few of these in my day," I replied mildly. "The Oak Ridge Club's been around longer than I have." "Have you?" Her surprise seemed genuine. "I assumed you weren't, well, the country club type." "My grandfather was one of the founding members in 1932, I said, enjoying the flicker of confusion on her face. "Millers have attended every gala since." Michael smiled proudly. "Dad's donated to their charitable foundation for years. They named a scholarship after my mother." Victoria's perfectly manicured eyebrows rose slightly, but she quickly recovered. "How quaint. Well, I'm looking forward to meeting some new people. This town could use some fresh perspectives." "Oh, I think tonight will certainly offer that," I agreed. The Oak Ridge Club was a stately brick building on the edge of town surrounded by manicured grounds and an 18-hole golf course. As we pulled up in Michael's SUV, he'd insisted I not drive myself so soon after surgery. I could see Victoria's eyes gleaming with anticipation. The main ballroom was decorated elegantly with crystal chandeliers and tables adorned with fresh flower arrangements. A string quartet played quietly in the corner. Around the room, Oak Ridge's most prominent citizens mingled, cocktails in hand. Victoria immediately began scanning the crowd, looking for the most influential people to charm. I spotted James across the room, giving me a subtle nod to confirm everything was in place. And there at a table near the back sat William and Catherine Monroe, looking slightly uncomfortable in their formal wear, clearly surprised to have been invited to such an event. Victoria hadn't noticed them yet. She was too busy greeting Richard Taylor, the club president, with an enthusiastic handshake and a practiced smile. "Mr. Taylor, I'm Victoria Miller. It's so wonderful to finally meet you. I've heard so much about your work with the Historical Preservation Committee." Richard, a shrewd businessman in his 60s who'd known me for decades, glanced my way with a hint of amusement. Victoria, yes, I believe I've seen some of your social media content about our little town. She preened, oblivious to the edge in his voice. Oh, you follow my accounts. How wonderful. I'm just trying to document authentic rural life, you know. Show my followers what it's really like. Indeed, Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. And how are you enjoying your authentic rural experience? Before Victoria could answer, the dinner bell rang, saving Richard from what would undoubtedly have been a self-aggrandizing monologue. We made our way to our assigned table, Victoria's disappointment evident, when she realized we weren't seated with the mayor or any of the town's wealthier residents. The first part of the evening proceeded normally. A three-course dinner was served, polite conversation flowed, and the usual announcements about fundraising goals were made. Victoria kept trying to network, excusing herself repeatedly to introduce herself to various attendees she deemed important. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Richard Taylor took the podium for the evening's main program. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to our scholarship presentations, we have a special address from one of Oak Ridge's most dedicated supporters. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Robert Miller. Victoria's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. She turned to Michael. Your father is speaking, you didn't tell me. Michael looked equally surprised. I didn't know. I stood straightening my suit jacket and made my way to the podium with measured steps. The room fell silent, all eyes on the supposedly simple farmer about to address the town's elite. Thank you, Richard. Good evening, everyone. My voice was steady, stronger than it had been since the surgery. For those who don't know me, I'm Robert Miller. My family has farmed in Oak Ridge for 5 generations. Victoria was staring at me, confusion written across her face. This wasn't the doddering old man she'd been mocking on social media. Tonight I want to talk about authentic wealth. I let the words hang in the air. Not the kind that needs to be flaunted on social media, not the kind that comes from putting others down to lift yourself up, but the kind that works quietly, building communities, supporting families, creating opportunities. Tonight I want to talk about authentic wealth. I let the words hang in the air. Not the kind that needs to be flaunted on social media. Not the kind that comes from putting others down to lift yourself up, but the kind that works quietly, building communities, supporting families, creating opportunities. I could see Victoria shifting uncomfortably in her seat, glancing at Michael with growing unease. The Miller family has been blessed in many ways, I continued. Our farm has provided for us through good times and bad. But what many people don't know is how we've chosen to share those blessings. I nodded to James, who activated the projection screen behind me. A simple logo appeared, the Miller Family Foundation, established 1978. For over 40 years, our family has operated a private foundation supporting rural education, healthcare, and small business development throughout Iowa. We don't put our name on buildings. We don't hold press conferences. We simply do the work quietly and consistently. The screen changed to show scholarship statistics. 237 college scholarships for local students, 42 small business grants, 17 emergency funds for families facing medical crises. Victoria's expression had transformed from confusion to shock. This wasn't fitting her narrative of the backward farmer stuck in the past. We've also been blessed with good business sense, I continued. The Miller farm you see today is just the public face of our family's work. Another slide appeared showing a complex organizational chart. Miller Agricultural Holdings at the center, with dozens of subsidiaries branching outward. Our operations now include agricultural processing facilities, distribution centers, equipment manufacturing, and land management across 12 states. Annual revenue, $38 million. Total asset valuation, $52 million. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Victoria had gone pale, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. I also want to address the Miller Family Foundation's charitable work, I said, my voice growing stronger. We've been quietly supporting local families in need for generations. James clicked to the next slide. A document appeared showing financial support details. Eleanor Monroe assisted living care monthly support, $3,200 for 48 months. Total foundation contribution, $153,600. Victoria was trying to become invisible, slumping in her chair. William and Catherine Monroe, seated across the room, looked up in confusion at the mention of Eleanor's name. Now, you might wonder why I'm sharing this information publicly, After all, charity should be private, shouldn't it? I pulled out my phone and connected it to the projector system. Unfortunately, some recipients of our family's generosity have chosen to publicly mock that generosity. The first screenshot appeared on the large screen, Victoria's TikTok video calling our farm a poverty museum. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. This video received 2.3 million views. The creator called my family trailer trash, and our farm everything backward about America. More screenshots appeared, each more insulting than the last. My father-in-law represents generational poverty. Old white farmers hoarding land. Hillbilly cosplay. The room was dead silent. Victoria had put her head in her hands. William and Catherine Monroe were staring at their daughter in horror, finally realizing who was being discussed. These are direct quotes from social media content created by someone whose family has been living on Miller Foundation charity for 3 years. I clicked to the next slide, displaying property deeds. I want to be very clear about our farm's actual financial situation. Anderson Organic Farms Miller Properties. Miller Holdings 23 rental properties. Combined value $14.2 million. Agricultural operations $38 million. Monthly revenue $285,000. The numbers hung in the air like an accusation. The poor farmer trying to sell his worthless property for $920,000 actually owns a $52 million agricultural empire. Richard Taylor, the club president, was staring at the screen in amazement. "Robert, I had no idea you were—" "That's the point, Richard," I interrupted gently. "Real wealth doesn't need announcements. It doesn't need social media validation. It just works quietly, helping people who need help." I turned to face Victoria's table directly. "Until those people decide to bite the hand that feeds them." Victoria finally looked up. Tears had ruined her $300 makeup. Michael sat beside her, pale and confused, trying to process everything he was hearing. Effective immediately, the Miller Family Foundation is reassessing all charitable commitments. Recipients who demonstrate ingratitude or disrespect will have their funding redirected to more deserving causes. William Monroe stood up shakily. "Mr. Miller, sir, we had no idea." "I know you didn't, William. That was intentional. But your daughter did know she was attacking her family's benefactor. She just didn't care." I pulled out the final document. Employment termination notices for William and Catherine Monroe, effective Monday morning. Eleanor Monroe's assisted living funding ends October 31st. The apartment lease for Unit 23B at Willowbrook Complex is voided for violation of community standards. Catherine started crying. William sat down hard, looking like he might faint. "You see, ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when performed wealth meets authentic wealth, when social media followers try to compete with actual financial power." I closed my briefcase and looked around the room. Victoria wanted to show her followers what escaping poverty looked like. Now they can watch her learn what real poverty feels like. The crowd sat in stunned silence as I walked back to my table. Victoria stumbled to her feet, designer dress, wrinkled makeup, destroyed. "Robert, please, I didn't know." "You didn't know because you never bothered to ask. You just assumed. You judged. You mocked. And you broadcast that mockery to millions of people." "I'll delete everything. I'll apologize publicly. Please don't do this to my parents." I sat down at my table and picked up my wine glass. "Victoria, 3 years ago, I quietly hired your parents because they needed work. I've been paying your grandmother's care costs since before you joined our family. I never asked for credit, never demanded recognition." "I know, I'm sorry. But I also never tolerated disrespect. And I certainly don't subsidize people who call me trailer trash on social media." The room was watching this exchange like a tennis match. Your followers wanted to see authentic wealth. Now they know what it looks like. It looks like consequences. Security appeared at my elbow. "Mr. Miller, should we escort them out?" "No need. They'll leave on their own." Victoria grabbed Michael's arm. "Please, Michael, talk to him." Michael looked at his wife with something between pity and disgust. "Victoria, you did this. All of it. He gave your family everything and you mocked him for sport." "But I didn't know." "That's exactly the problem. You never tried to know." They left through the ballroom's main entrance, Victoria's heels echoing on the marble floor. The room stayed silent until the doors closed behind them. Then Richard Taylor started clapping. Margaret Williams joined him. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was applauding. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard announced, let's hear it for authentic generosity and appropriate boundaries. The ovation lasted 3 full minutes. October 15th, 3 days after the gala, the consequences rolled out exactly as promised. William and Catherine Monroe received their final paychecks Monday morning. 36 years of steady employment ended because their daughter couldn't control her social media mouth. They tried calling me, left voicemails begging for reconsideration. I didn't return the calls. Eleanor Monroe got moved to county assisted living Tuesday afternoon. The facility was clean and adequately staffed, but the private room with garden views was gone. Now she shared space with 3 other residents in a ward that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Victoria and Michael's apartment lease was voided Wednesday. They had 72 hours to relocate. With their combined income down to just Michael's $75,000 salary, luxury housing wasn't an option anymore. The social media fallout was swift and brutal. Victoria's escaping generational poverty video got flooded with comments after news of the charity gala spread. This aged like milk. Imagine calling your billionaire father-in-law trailer trash. Poor farmer owns a $52 million empire. Poor influencer about to learn what actual poverty looks like. She deleted TikTok first, then Instagram, then Facebook. Her follower count hemorrhaged faster than her family's bank account. Local news picked up the story. Social media influencers' farm-shaming campaign backfires spectacularly. The Des Moines Register ran a feature about hidden wealth in rural Iowa. 3 different media outlets reached out for interviews. I declined them all. Michael came to see me Friday evening, found me in the barn at the same wooden desk, same old ledger books. Dad, I owe you an apology. For what? For not standing up sooner, for letting her disrespect you and our family for so long. I set down my pen. Michael, marriage is complicated. Loyalty gets tested. You chose correctly when it mattered. What happens now? Now you decide whether you're married to someone who loves you or someone who loves your potential status. She wants to try counseling, says she can change. People can change, son, but they have to want to change for the right reasons, not just because they got caught. Michael nodded, processing this truth. What about her family? Her parents are good people. They didn't deserve this. You're right, they didn't deserve what their daughter did to them or what she did to us. I opened my desk drawer and handed him a business card. Tell William to call me next week. I might know someone who needs a good groundskeeper, someone who appreciates loyalty and discretion. Really? Really. Punish the behavior, not the family. That's the difference between justice and revenge. Michael smiled for the first time in weeks. Thanks, Dad. Just remember this lesson, son. Authentic wealth serves others. Fake wealth serves only ego. Choose wisely. After he left, I sat in the quiet barn surrounded by 40 years of memories. The wooden desk my father built. The ledger books that tracked our family's real success. The simple tools that created a $52 million empire. Victoria was right about one thing. Generational wealth is real, but it's not about money. It's about character. And character, unlike social media followers, can't be bought. A week passed. Michael moved back to the farm, temporarily taking the guest bedroom. Victoria had gone to stay with a college friend in Chicago. Their marriage hung in limbo, not quite over, but fundamentally changed. The Monroes were struggling to make ends meet, their comfortable life suddenly yanked away. I was sitting on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the cornfields, when James's car pulled into the driveway. He carried a leather portfolio and a bottle of good scotch. Thought you might need this, he said, setting the bottle on the small table between our rocking chairs. Doctor cleared you for alcohol yet? No, but what he doesn't know won't kill me. I poured us each a finger's worth. What's in the portfolio? The rest of what you asked for, the Horizon Global Connection. I took a slow sip, letting the liquor warm my chest. Let's hear it. James opened the portfolio, pulling out several documents. Victoria Monroe Miller was indeed on Horizon's payroll. Not directly, they're too smart for that. She was listed as a cultural consultant for a subsidiary called Heartland Community Ventures. Consulting on what exactly? According to the contract I managed to obtain, she was hired to facilitate community integration and property acquisition strategies in rural markets. James raised an eyebrow. In plain English, identify valuable properties and help Horizon buy them cheap. So she wasn't just after our farm, she was their scout. Exactly, and she was good at it. Before your son, she'd helped them acquire 3 other properties in similar situations. Elderly owners, unclear succession plans, undervalued assets. Unta, I stared out at the darkening fields. How much were they paying her? $10,000 per month base salary, plus a 15% commission on any acquisition price savings below market value. I did the quick math. If she'd sold our place for $920,000 when it's worth over $3 million, she'd have pocketed over $300,000 on the commission alone. Plus bonuses for strategic properties. Your farm was considered essential to their master plan. James pulled out a map. See this Horizon's planning a massive development. Luxury homes, golf courses, a man-made lake. They've been buying up farmland piece by piece. Your property is the keystone, right in the middle of everything. I examined the map, feeling a cold anger settle in my bones. They want to pave over 5 generations of Miller sweat and sacrifice to build vacation homes for Chicago executives. That's the plan, or was, until you expose Victoria. I took another sip of scotch. What's their next move? According to my source, they're regrouping, looking for another way in. They don't know yet that you own half the county through your holding companies. Once they figure that out, James trailed off. They'll come directly to me, try to buy me out with some generous offer. Most likely. I nodded slowly, a plan forming. Let them come. Rob, what are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time for a different kind of lesson. Victoria was just the foot soldier. Let's go after the generals. James looked concerned. These are powerful people, Rob. Billions in investments, connections, and state government lawyers on retainer. I smiled thinly. Sounds like a fair fight then. The next morning, I called Eliza Donovan at the Historical Society. Eliza, remember that conversation we had about Horizon Global? I need you to organize an emergency meeting of the town council. Tonight, if possible. What's this about, Robert? Protecting Oak Ridge. I'll explain everything at the meeting. That evening, the small town council chamber was packed. Word had spread quickly that something important was happening. Mayor Simmons, looking nervous, called the meeting to order. We've convened at the request of Mr. Robert Miller, who has information regarding future development plans for our community. I stepped to the podium carrying the same portfolio James had brought me. The crowd murmured. Most had heard about my revelation at the gala, and everyone was curious about what bombshell I might drop next. Thank you for coming on such short notice, I began. I'll get straight to the point. Oak Ridge is under threat. A company called Horizon Global has been secretly buying up farmland around our town with plans to build a massive resort development. I unfolded the map and held it up. This is their master plan. Luxury homes where your family farms now stand. Golf courses replacing cornfields. A man-made lake covering some of the most fertile soil in Iowa. Angry mutters spread through the room. Mayor Simmons looked increasingly uncomfortable. Some of you have already sold your land to shell companies, not realizing who the real buyer was. Others have been approached with offers that seemed too good to refuse. And some, I paused, looking directly at the mayor, have been quietly helping this process along. Mayor Simmons stood up, face flushed. That's an outrageous accusation, Robert. Is it? Then perhaps you can explain why you've had 6 private meetings with Horizon executives in the past 3 months, or why your brother-in-law's construction company was promised the first contracts once the development begins. The mayor sputtered but couldn't form a coherent denial. The crowd's mutters grew louder. I'm not here to point fingers, I continued. I'm here to offer a solution. Horizon wants our land because we're divided and vulnerable. But what if we weren't? I revealed my proposal, the Oak Ridge Agricultural Trust, a legal entity that would collectively protect local farmland from development while still allowing families to own and farm their properties. Any sales would need approval from the trust board elected by the community. I'm putting all 5,000 acres of Miller land into this trust, I announced, and I'm seeding it with a $10 million endowment from the Miller Foundation to help struggling farms modernize and thrive. The room erupted in surprised conversation. I raised my hand for quiet. This isn't charity, it's common sense. Together we're stronger than any developer's checkbook. This is our home, our heritage. Are we going to sell it off piece by piece until there's nothing left but vacation homes and golf courses? Or are we going to protect it for our children and grandchildren? The vote was nearly unanimous. Only Mayor Simmons and two council members, known to be in his pocket, opposed the plan. By the end of the night, 17 families had pledged to join the trust, representing over 12,000 acres of farmland. As people filed out handshakes and backslaps following me to the door, Sheriff Dave pulled me aside. "Bold move, Rob. Horizon won't take this lying down. I'm counting on it. Watch yourself. Money like that plays dirty. So do farmers when our land is threatened." 2 days later, a sleek black Audi pulled into my driveway. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped out, followed by a younger woman carrying a leather portfolio similar to James's. I was waiting on the porch rocking chair, angled to face them. Shotgun conspicuously leaned against the wall beside me. "Mr. Miller." The man flashed a practiced smile. "I'm Edward Thornton, Executive Vice President of Horizon Global. This is Melissa Chen, our General Counsel." I didn't stand or offer my hand. "I know who you are." Thornton's smile faltered slightly. "May we come up? We have a proposition we believe will interest you greatly." "You can say your piece from right there." Melissa Chen frowned at this breach of corporate etiquette, but Thornton recovered quickly. "Very well. Mr. Miller, we understand you've recently taken steps to complicate our development plans for the Oak Ridge area. That's one way to put it. We're prepared to make you an extremely generous offer for your cooperation. We know about your holdings, all of them, the 5,000 acres, the water rights, the easements. We're prepared to offer $75 million for the complete package." I let the number hang in the air for a moment. It was indeed generous, about 20% above market value. "Not interested." Thornton blinked in surprise. "Perhaps you didn't hear me correctly. $75 million, Mr. Miller. Watch. Plus, we'd be willing to preserve the original Miller farmhouse as a historical site. Your family name would be honored." "I heard you just fine." "The answer is still no." Chen stepped forward. "Mr. Miller, if you're holding out for more money." "This isn't about money, Ms. Chen. This is about legacy, about community, about not letting people like you turn farmland that's fed this country for generations into playgrounds for the wealthy." Thornton's friendly facade began to slip. "The agricultural age is ending, Mr. Miller. Small farms can't compete with industrial agriculture. You're fighting against progress." I finally stood looking down at them from the porch. "That's where you're wrong. The Miller farms are thoroughly modern in operation. We just don't see the need to tear down our heritage to embrace the future. And we're not small. Together with the Oak Ridge Agricultural Trust, we control over 17,000 acres now." Thornton's face hardened. "You should know that we have other options. Eminent domain can be a powerful tool when the right political connections are in place." "Is that a threat, Mr. Thornton?" "It's a reality. Governor Henderson is very supportive of developments that increase the tax base and create jobs." I smiled. "You mean the same Governor Henderson whose daughter received a full scholarship from the Miller Foundation? The one whose campaign received its largest donation from Miller Agricultural Holdings, that Governor Henderson?" The uncertainty that flashed across Thornton's face was deeply satisfying. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Miller. We can be valuable allies or formidable opponents. I made my choice when you sent Victoria to manipulate my son and steal our farm. You want a war, you've got one." As they drove away, James pulled in, having watched the exchange from down the road. "That went about as expected," he said, joining me on the porch. "They threatened eminent domain." "I figured they might. They don't know you donated those 500 acres for the new state wildlife preserve last year. Hard to argue for seizure when you're known for conservation efforts." I nodded. "They'll be back with something else. Pressure on the bank to call in loans, environmental complaints, something. And we'll be ready." James hesitated. "Have you talked to Michael about all this?" "He should know what's coming. Tonight, I want him to understand exactly what Victoria was part of." Michael took the news about Victoria's employment with Horizon Global better than I expected. A quiet resignation settled over him as I showed him the evidence James had gathered. The contract, the payments, the previous properties she'd helped acquire. So none of it was real, he said finally. Not even in the beginning. I can't answer that, son. Only Victoria can. He nodded slowly. I need to see her. Talk to her face to face. Are you sure that's wise? No, but it's necessary. The next day, Michael drove to Chicago to confront Victoria. He returned late that night looking both exhausted and oddly peaceful. I was still up reviewing documents in the kitchen. How did it go? I asked as he dropped heavily into a chair across from me. About how you'd expect. Denial, then anger, then tears, then promises to change. He rubbed his face. She admitted everything eventually. Said Horizon approached her after she lost her marketing job. Told her it was just business development, nothing illegal. And she believed that, or pretended to. She claimed she fell in love with me for real, that her feelings changed over time. Do you believe her? Michael stared at his hands. I don't know what to believe anymore. What happens now? I told her I want a divorce. She cried, begged me to reconsider, said we could start over somewhere new. And I told her I'd rather start over alone than with someone I can never trust again. His voice broke slightly. I really loved her dad. I reached out across the table and gripped his shoulder. I know you did, son. We sat in silence for a while, the old kitchen clock ticking steadily on the wall. What about her parents? Michael asked eventually. And her grandmother. I've been thinking about the Monroes. They were collateral damage in a war they likely knew nothing about. William called today, left another message asking for a meeting. Will you see him? I think so. Tomorrow, perhaps. Michael nodded. Good. They don't deserve to suffer for Victoria's choices. Wise words. Your mother would be proud of the man you've become. He smiled faintly at the mention of Sarah gone now for 15 years. She'd have seen through Victoria in an instant, wouldn't she? Without a doubt, Sarah could spot a fake from a mile away. As promised, I met with William Monroe the following morning. We sat in neutral territory, the Oak Ridge Diner, with mugs of coffee between us. William looked haggard the past week, having aged him considerably. Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Miller, he began, voice humble. I can't begin to tell you how ashamed we are about Victoria's behavior. Did you know, I asked directly, about her connection to Horizon? He shook his head emphatically. No, sir, not until after the gala. She confessed everything when we confronted her. He looked down at his coffee. We raised her better than this, I swear. Or we tried to, at least. I believed him. William had always been a hard worker, respected by his colleagues. The vineyard bankruptcy hit her hard, didn't it? Changed her. Before that, she was just a normal, happy kid. After she became obsessed with appearances, with getting back what we'd lost. He sighed heavily. Catherine and I tried to explain that things aren't what matter. But Victoria, she couldn't accept our new reality. And now you're facing another new reality because of her choices. Yes, sir. Catherine's had to move in with her sister in Omaha. I'm staying with a friend from church until I can find affordable housing. Eleanor, his voice caught, the county facility is doing their best, but it's not the same level of care. I let him finish his coffee before speaking again. William, I meant what I told Michael. I don't believe in punishing family for one person's mistakes. Hope flickered in his tired eyes. Sir, the Miller Foundation has an assisted living facility in Des Moines. Small, private, excellent care. There's a place for Eleanor there if you want it. William's eyes filled with tears. Mr. Miller, I don't know what to say. Nothing to say. It's the right thing to do. I slid a business card across the table. An Oak Ridge Community College needs a new facilities manager. Hours are reasonable, pay is fair. The job's yours if you want it. Why would you do this after everything Victoria did? Because authentic wealth isn't about hoarding resources or wielding power, William. It's about using what you have to do what's right. I finished my coffee. Catherine is welcome to apply for the administrative position at the community center. It's not accounting, but it's steady work. William was openly crying now, drawing curious glances from other diners. I don't deserve your kindness. No one deserves kindness, William. That's what makes it kindness and not payment. I stood leaving money for the coffee. One condition, though. Anything. Victoria stays away. From Michael, from me, and from Oak Ridge. She's made her choices. Now she lives with them. William nodded solemnly. I understand. And thank you. As I walked out of the diner into the crisp October morning, I felt lighter than I had in months. The battle with Horizon was just beginning, but that was business. The personal wounds were starting to heal. Back at the farm, I found Michael in the barn, looking through old photographs we'd stored in the loft. Pictures of his mother, of his grandparents, of himself as a boy, learning to drive the tractor. Found something interesting, he said, holding up a faded photograph I hadn't seen in decades. It showed my father standing proudly beside the farmhouse, arm around my mother's shoulders, a sold sign visible in the foreground. The day they bought this place, I said, taking the photo carefully. 1952. Look what's written on the back. I turned it over. In my father's precise handwriting, new beginning, not just a farm, a legacy for generations. Remember what matters. My throat tightened unexpectedly. He'd have been heartbroken to see it turned into vacation homes and golf courses. It won't be, Michael said firmly. Not while we're here. I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and saw not just Sarah's eyes and my father's chin, but the culmination of every miller who had worked this land, the keeper of the legacy. No, I agreed, not while we're here. Word of my confrontation with Horizon spread quickly through Oak Ridge. More families joined the Agricultural Trust, strengthening our position. But as James and I had predicted, Horizon didn't give up easily. The first attack came through the bank. Midwest Regional, which held mortgages on several trust members' farms, suddenly began reviewing all agricultural loans for compliance issues. 3 families received notices that their loans needed to be restructured, with significantly higher interest rates and accelerated payment schedules. I called an emergency meeting at the town hall. The affected farmers were panicking, one poor harvest away from foreclosure under the new terms. They're trying to pick us off one by one, I explained. Pressure the most vulnerable members until they're forced to sell. What can we do? Asked Frank Donaldson, a third-generation farmer whose 800 acres had been targeted. I can't meet these new terms, not with crop prices what they are. I laid out my proposal. The Miller Foundation would establish a special mortgage relief fund offering to refinance the targeted farms at favorable rates. We'd transfer the loans from Midwest Regional to our own financial arm, removing Horizon's leverage. This isn't just charity, I explained. It's self-defense. Every farm they force into sale is another piece of our community lost. The plan was approved unanimously. By the end of the week, all 3 farms had been refinanced, their loans safely out of Horizon's reach. Midwest Regional's president, a decent man caught between corporate headquarters and community loyalty, called me privately. They're furious, Robert. I've never seen anything like it. The orders came directly from Chicago. Find any reason to pressure those specific farms. How did Horizon get that kind of influence over your loan committee? He hesitated. They bought a controlling interest in our parent company 3 months ago. It wasn't public yet. Another piece of the puzzle. They've been planning this for a long time. Longer than you know. Be careful, Robert. They're not done. He was right. The next attack came through regulatory channels. Suddenly, 5 farms in the trust were being investigated for alleged environmental violations. Fertilizer runoff, improper chemical storage, watershed contamination. The claims were fabricated, but fighting them would cost thousands in legal fees and lost productivity. Exactly what Horizon was counting on. Again, we gathered at the town hall. This time, James presented our response, a joint legal defense fund backed by the Miller Foundation and a team of environmental lawyers from Des Moines who would represent all accused farmers as a single entity. They want to drain your resources fighting individual battles, James explained. We'll consolidate the defense and turn their strategy against them. Every frivolous claim they bring strengthens our countersuit for harassment and defamation. The inspectors who had filed the initial reports found themselves facing uncomfortable questions about their sudden interest in farms that had passed previous inspections with flying colors. When depositions revealed that 2 inspectors had recently received consulting fees from a Horizon subsidiary, the investigations were quietly dropped. But Horizon had more weapons in its arsenal. The next attack targeted our public image. A series of articles appeared in regional papers questioning the motives behind the Oak Ridge Agricultural Trust. Wealthy farmer blocks economic development. Miller Foundation philanthropy or control. Luxury resort would bring hundreds of jobs to struggling county. The stories were technically accurate but deliberately misleading. focusing on potential jobs without mentioning the permanent loss of agricultural production, highlighting tax revenue without addressing increased infrastructure costs to the town. Most concerning was a profile of me that painted my actions as those of a controlling patriarch desperate to maintain power rather than a community member protecting shared heritage. The article even suggested that my exposure of Victoria had been a calculated move to prevent my son from modernizing the family business. Michael was furious when he read it. This is character assassination. We need to sue them for libel. James shook his head. Everything's carefully worded to be technically defensible. A lawsuit would just give them more publicity. I had a different approach in mind. We don't fight this with lawyers. We fight it with truth. I contacted every farmer in the trust and asked for their personal stories, what their land meant to them, why they joined the trust, their visions for the future. Then I reached out to Catherine Jenkins, a respected freelance journalist who'd grown up in rural Iowa. I want to tell the real story of Oak Ridge, I explained, not through my voice, but through the voices of everyone who calls this place home. Catherine spent 2 weeks interviewing community members, photographing farms, and researching the environmental and economic impacts of developments similar to what Horizon proposed. The result was a powerful multimedia package that ran in the Des Moines Register and was picked up by several national outlets. Heartland Heritage, How One Iowa Town United to Preserve Its Future, told a compelling story of community resilience against corporate pressure. It contrasted Horizon's promises with the aftermath of similar developments in other rural communities. Initial economic booms, followed by environmental problems, strained infrastructure, and cultural erosion. Most powerful were the personal testimonials from farmers young and old explaining why the trust mattered to them. Even tech-savvy 20-something farmers who'd embraced modern agricultural methods spoke passionately about maintaining the balance between progress and preservation. The public response was overwhelming. Supportive messages poured in from across Iowa and beyond. Several state legislators publicly questioned whether Horizon's development plan aligned with Iowa's agricultural preservation goals. The governor, previously silent on the issue, announced that his administration would carefully review any major land use changes in the region. Horizon Global's CEO, Jonathan Caldwell, finally entered the fray personally. He requested a private meeting with me through intermediaries, suggesting we meet on neutral ground in Des Moines. James advised caution. This could be a trap, or at minimum, an attempt to get material they can use against you later. Or it could be a genuine attempt to find common ground, I countered. Either way, I want to look this man in the eye. We met in a private dining room at an upscale Des Moines restaurant. Caldwell was younger than I expected, perhaps 50, with the polished appearance of someone who'd spent his career in boardrooms rather than fields. He was accompanied by the same legal counsel, Melissa Chen, who had come to my farm with Thornton. Mr. Miller, Caldwell began after pleasantries were exchanged. I appreciate your willingness to meet. I think there's been some unfortunate misunderstanding between our organizations. No misunderstanding, Mr. Caldwell. Your company tried to manipulate my son, steal my property, and destroy my community. I understood perfectly. Caldwell's smile remained fixed. That characterization doesn't reflect our corporate values or intentions. We see ourselves as partners in community development, not adversaries. Partners don't use deception and coercion, Mr. Caldwell. Partners don't hire people to infiltrate families and exploit personal relationships. If you're referring to Ms. Monroe Miller, I want to be clear that any actions she took beyond her professional responsibilities were her own choices. Horizon Global would never condone unethical behavior. I laughed outright. Plausible deniability wrapped in corporate speak. Very clean. Caldwell's smile finally faltered. Mr. Miller, I didn't come here to argue about the past. I came to find a path forward that benefits everyone. I'm listening. He pulled out a glossy presentation folder. We've completely redesigned our vision for the Oak Ridge area. More green space, smaller environmental footprint, preservation of key historical properties, including your original farmhouse. He laid out architectural renderings showing a more modest development centered around agricultural tourism, allowing visitors to experience farm life while preserving working farms. We're prepared to offer $100 million for the necessary land rights, plus a 10% equity stake in the completed development for the Oak Ridge Community Trust. Hundreds of permanent jobs, millions in annual tax revenue, all while celebrating rather than erasing agricultural heritage. The proposal was cleverly crafted, addressing many of the concerns raised in Catherine's article, offering significant financial benefits to the community, and wrapping it all in language of preservation and respect. It's an impressive pivot, Mr. Caldwell. Very responsive to public sentiment. He smiled, sensing progress. We listen and adapt. That's good business. It is. There's just one problem, which is, I don't believe you. Neither will anyone else in Oak Ridge. I closed his presentation folder and pushed it back across the table. Your company has demonstrated its true character. No amount of pretty pictures or promises can erase that. Caldwell's facade of friendliness vanished. This obstinance is costing your community opportunities they may never see again. That's for them to decide, not you, not me. Be reasonable, Miller. Development is inevitable. The only question is whether you benefit from it or get crushed by it. We've survived droughts, floods, market crashes, and corporate predators before, Mr. Caldwell. We're still here. Will Horizon Global even exist in 100 years? As the meeting ended without resolution, Caldwell made one final attempt. This isn't over. We have investments and interests throughout Iowa. Political capital you can't match. One small town can't stand against progress forever. You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about one town or one development. This is about something more fundamental. When people have deep roots, Mr. Caldwell, they don't uproot easily, no matter how much money you offer. On the drive back to Oak Ridge, James was unusually quiet. Finally, as we passed the county line, he spoke. He's right about one thing, Rob. This isn't over. They'll keep coming. If not Horizon, then someone else. The pressure on rural land will only increase. I know. That's why the trust isn't enough. We need something more permanent. What are you thinking? Conservation easements, legal protections that permanently limit development regardless of ownership changes. Once established, they're nearly impossible to undo. James whistled. That's nuclear. It would significantly reduce the market value of the land. Exactly. Makes it worthless to developers, while farmers who actually want to farm can still afford it. The trust members would have to agree. It's a big ask, essentially reducing their largest asset's value on purpose. Then we'll need to make it worth their while. The idea crystallized over the following days. The Miller Foundation would offer a one-time payment to trust members who place their land under conservation easements, compensating them for the reduced market value while ensuring the land remained agricultural in perpetuity. I presented the concept at our next trust meeting, expecting resistance. Instead, many farmers immediately embraced it. My grandchildren are the sixth generation to work this land, said Martha Wilkins, whose family had farmed in Oak Ridge since 1880. I'd rather take less money now and know they'll have the chance to be the seventh, eighth, and ninth generations too. Others were understandably cautious, concerned about limiting options for their heirs. We compromised, allowing limited development of up to 5% of any protected parcel for family homes, farm-related businesses, or small-scale agricultural tourism. Within a month, over 60% of the trust's land was protected under conservation easements, including all 5,000 acres of Miller Holdings owns. The papers were filed quietly with the county recorder's office on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, Horizon Global's stock had dropped 8%, as news broke that their massive Iowa development was effectively dead. Analysts cited the unexpected conservation easements as a material adverse event that would significantly impact quarterly projections. The Des Moines Register's headline the next day read simply, "Oak Ridge farmers secure agricultural future." Edward Thornton called me, directly abandoning all pretense of corporate politeness. Do you have any idea what you've done, the shareholder value you've destroyed? I've secured my community's future, Mr. Thornton. As for your shareholders, perhaps they should invest in companies that create value without destroying communities. That evening, the farmers of Oak Ridge gathered at the town hall, not for an emergency meeting, but for a celebration. Tables groaned under the weight of potluck dishes. Children played tag between the rows of chairs. Old-timers told stories of harvests past, while young farmers discussed soil conservation techniques. Michael found me by the coffee urn, a plate of Martha Wilkins' famous apple pie in his hand. You did it, Dad. You actually did it. I shook my head. We did it. all of us together. Well, still it wouldn't have happened without you standing up first. He looked around at the celebrating community. Mom would be proud. Yes, I agreed, thinking of Sarah's fierce love for this land. She would be. As the evening wound down, Richard Taylor called for attention and raised his glass. To Robert Miller, who taught us all what authentic wealth really means. The room echoed with agreement, glasses lifted in a toast that humbled me more than any business success ever had. Later that night, back at the farmhouse, I sat in my study writing in the same leather-bound ledger my father had used and his father before him. But instead of crop yields and equipment costs, I was recording something more precious. The story of how a community had come together to preserve its heritage. On the last line of the page, I wrote the words my father had written on the back of that old photograph: remember what matters. Because in the end, Victoria had been right about one thing: generational wealth is real. But its true measure isn't money in the bank or acres on a deed. It's the values, the character, and the community that sustain us through good times and bad. That's a legacy worth fighting for. 2 months after the gala that changed everything, Oak Ridge settled into an uneasy calm. The conservation easements had effectively blocked Horizon Global's immediate plans, but everyone understood this was merely a battle won, not the war. Corporate interests had long memories and deeper pockets than most small towns could withstand. Victoria's fall from social media grace continued with relentless momentum. Her carefully cultivated image as an influencer exposing generational poverty had transformed overnight into a cautionary tale about authenticity and karma. Internet sleuths had uncovered her connection to Horizon Global, publicizing her role as their cultural consultant. Former sponsors rushed to distance themselves, canceling contracts and removing her content from their platforms. I found little satisfaction in watching her online empire crumble. The real damage had already been done to my family, particularly to Michael, who moved through his days with the hollowed-out look of someone processing profound betrayal. He'd filed for divorce, the paperwork moving through the system with cold efficiency. Victoria had contested nothing, perhaps realizing any court battle would only further expose her duplicity. On a crisp December morning, I was reviewing quarterly reports in the barn office when Michael appeared at the door, snow-dusting his shoulders. "Got a minute, Dad?" "For you, always." I set aside the paperwork. "What's on your mind?" He sat heavily in the chair across from me, removing his work gloves. "I've been thinking about what comes next. For me, for the farm, for everything. And I want to expand our organic operation. Triple the acreage next season." He leaned forward, a spark of enthusiasm breaking through his melancholy. "The market reports show demand growing faster than supply. We're positioned perfectly with our certification already in place." I nodded, pleased to see him focusing on the future. "Sounds promising. What do you need?" "About $2 million in capital investment. New equipment, more storage capacity, additional certification costs." He pulled out a tablet, bringing up a detailed business plan. "I've run the numbers. We'd see full return on investment within 3 years, plus establish ourselves as the largest organic producer in the state." I studied the projections, impressed by the thoroughness. This wasn't an impulsive idea, but a well-researched strategy. "When did you put all this together?" "Been working on it for weeks. Needed something to focus on besides." He trailed off, not needing to complete the sentence. "It's solid work, Michael. Very solid." I scrolled through the financial projections. "Have you talked to James about the legal structure? We'd need to adjust some of our holdings." "Meeting with him tomorrow." Michael hesitated. "There's something else, Dad. I want to rebrand our consumer-facing operations. New name, new logo, new marketing approach." "Leaving the Miller name behind?" I kept my voice neutral, though the idea sent an unexpected pang through me. "Not behind, just updating it for the next generation." He pulled up another screen showing a sleek, modern logo: Miller Legacy Farms, cultivating tomorrow. The tension in my chest eased. Not abandoning our heritage, but building on it, exactly as it should be. "I like it." I handed back the tablet. "The investment's approved. Let's meet with the operations team next week to start implementation." Michael seemed surprised by my immediate agreement. "That's it. No debate about traditions or the way we've always done things." I chuckled. "Son, do you think I built a $52 million operation by clinging to the past? The Miller way has always been about smart adaptation while honoring our roots. I gestured to the antique ledger books beside my modern laptop. We keep what works, improve what doesn't. That's how we've survived for 5 generations. A slow smile spread across his face. Victoria never understood that, did she? She saw the old truck and the farmhouse and assumed everything about us was stuck in the past. Most people see what they expect to see. It takes wisdom to look deeper. I stood clasping his shoulder. Your mother would be proud of this plan. She always pushed me to consider organic farming long before it was mainstream. I remember. His eyes grew distant with the memory. She used to say chemicals were borrowing from our grandchildren's health. Smart woman. I should have listened sooner. I reached for my coat. Come on, let's walk the North Fields. I want to show you where I think we should start the expansion. As we stepped outside into the winter sunshine, I felt a profound sense of rightness. The betrayal that had threatened to tear our family apart had instead clarified what truly mattered: the legacy we were building, not just in land and assets, but in values and purpose. January brought heavy snow and a surprising visitor. I was clearing the driveway with the old tractor when a taxi pulled up. Catherine Monroe stepped out, bundled against the cold-looking, uncertain as she paid the driver. I stopped the tractor and climbed down. Mrs. Monroe, this is unexpected. She clutched her purse tightly, nervous energy radiating from her slight frame. Mr. Miller, I hope I'm not intruding. I need to speak with you. Let's get you inside where it's warm. I led her to the house, taking her coat and offering coffee, which she gratefully accepted. Once settled at the kitchen table, Catherine stared into her mug as if searching for words. I wanted to thank you in person for what you did for Eleanor and William. You had every right to cut us off completely. As I told your husband, I don't believe in punishing family for one person's mistakes. She nodded, blinking back tears. William loves his new position, and Mother is so much happier at Willow Creek. The care is, we could never afford anything like it. I'm glad to hear it. I waited, sensing there was more to this visit. Catherine took a deep breath. There's something you should know about Victoria, about why she struggled to find the words, why she targeted my son, why she was so desperate to prove herself by any means necessary. Yes, Catherine set down her mug, hands trembling slightly. It wasn't just the vineyard bankruptcy. That was part of it, but there was more. She pulled an old photograph from her purse and placed it on the table. This is Victoria's father, her biological father. I studied the image of a handsome man in an expensive suit standing beside a much younger Catherine. There was something vaguely familiar about him. Richard Monroe, Catherine said quietly, William's older brother. The pieces clicked into place. The Monroe vineyard wasn't William's. No, it belonged to Richard. He was brilliant, charismatic, wealthy, and reckless. He built the vineyard into one of the most prestigious in Napa, then leveraged everything on expansion just before the 2008 crash. Her voice grew distant with memory. William and I worked for him. I was his administrative assistant. We became involved. When I became pregnant, Richard wanted nothing to do with it. He was already married. So William stepped in. Catherine nodded. He gave Victoria his name, raised her as his own, never once treated her differently, even after we had 2 sons together. Her eyes filled with tears. Richard would visit occasionally, always with expensive gifts and grand promises. Victoria adored him, though he'd abandoned her. Then came the crash, and Richard, her voice broke. He took his own life rather than face bankruptcy. Victoria never recovered from losing him, I guessed. She was 15, old enough to understand what happened, young enough to idealize him completely. In her mind, Richard represented success, wealth, status, everything she thought mattered. Catherine looked up at me, eyes pleading for understanding. When William stepped in to help Richard's widow settle the estate, Victoria saw it as a betrayal. She blamed him for not somehow saving the vineyard, saving Richard. And she's been trying to recapture her biological father's lifestyle ever since. Yes, the designer clothes, the luxury car, the social climbing. It was all an attempt to become what she thought Richard would have wanted. Catherine shook her head sadly. Nothing was ever enough. She was always chasing some imaginary standard of success. I considered this new information, seeing Victoria in a slightly different light. Not excused, but perhaps better understood. Why are you telling me this now? Because she's hit rock bottom, Mr. Miller. The divorce, the social media collapse, losing her job with Horizon. She has nothing left. Catherine hesitated. She's been in treatment. Depression, anxiety, identity issues, the doctors call it. For the first time, she's confronting the real reasons behind her behavior. I'm sorry for her struggles, but I'm not what you expect me to do with this information. Nothing, you owe her nothing. Catherine gathered her courage. But she wrote letters, to you and to Michael. She asked me to deliver them. She pulled 2 sealed envelopes from her purse. You can throw them away. That's your right. I promised her I would try. I accepted the envelopes without comment, setting them aside on the counter. There's one more thing, Catherine said as she prepared to leave. Victoria's therapist suggested she make amends where possible. She's been working on a documentary, the real story behind influencer culture and corporate land grabs, using her experience as a cautionary tale. That sounds constructive. She's naming names, Horizon executives, other influencers involved in similar schemes. It's not going to make her any friends in the industry. Catherine pulled on her coat. I just thought you should know. Whatever else she is, my daughter isn't a coward. After Catherine left, I stared at the 2 sealed envelopes for a long time before finally opening mine. Victoria's handwriting was surprisingly vulnerable, lacking the polished perfection of her online persona. Mr. Miller, she began, there are no words adequate to express my remorse for the pain I've caused your family. I won't insult you with excuses or beg for forgiveness I haven't earned. Instead, I want you to know I'm facing the truth about myself for the first time. My actions were inexcusable. My treatment of you and your home was shameful. While I can't undo the damage I've provided, the enclosed USB drive containing all communications between myself and Horizon Global, including their plans for other rural communities. Use it however you see fit. I owe you at least this much truth, Victoria. The USB drive contained exactly what she promised. Emails, contracts, strategy documents, and recorded conversations detailing not just Horizon's plans for Oak Ridge, but similar operations across 4 states. It was enough evidence to launch investigations into their business practices and warn other communities of their tactics. I didn't show Michael his letter immediately. That had to be his choice. Instead, I left both the letter and the information about Victoria's documentary on his desk with a simple motto: your decision. Whatever you choose, I support you. Some wounds needed time to heal before they could be reopened, even for closure. February brought the first stirrings of Horizon's counterattack. Not against me personally, they'd learned that lesson, but against the entire concept of conservation easements. Their lobbyists in the state capitol introduced legislation that would create a process for easement extinguishment in cases of compelling public interest. James called as soon as he heard. It's a direct response to what we did in Oak Ridge. If this passes, they could potentially challenge our easements by arguing their development constitutes a compelling public interest due to jobs and tax revenue. How serious is the threat? They've got support from some powerful legislators. The bill's being framed as rural economic development rather than what it really is, a corporate land grab enabler. I thought for a moment, we need to change the narrative. Make this about family farms versus corporate developers, not jobs versus conservation. That's going to take a major public relations push. Hearings start in 3 weeks. Then we better get started. The Miller Foundation organized a coalition of farmers, environmental groups, and rural advocates. We arranged transportation for trust members to attend the hearings, prepared testimony highlighting the generational impact of family farms, and commissioned an economic study showing the long-term benefits of agricultural preservation compared to the boom and bust cycle of resort development. As the hearing date approached, an unexpected ally emerged. Victoria's documentary, Influence Confessions of a Corporate Scout, was released online, immediately going viral. Using her insider knowledge, she exposed the systematic way companies like Horizon targeted rural communities, the deceptive tactics they employed, and the environmental and cultural damage left in their wake. The timing couldn't have been better. Her detailed account of how she'd been trained to identify and exploit vulnerable properties gave a human face to the predatory practices we were fighting against. Several legislators mentioned the documentary during preliminary discussions, expressing concern about the tactics it revealed. The hearings themselves became a David versus Goliath story that captured media attention across the Midwest. Farmers in overalls and work boots testified alongside environmental scientists and rural economists, all opposing a bill backed by suited corporate representatives and professional lobbyists. My own testimony focused on the principle at stake. Conservation easements represent a sacred contract between landowners and future generations. I told the legislative committee, they're one of the few tools family farms have to ensure their legacies survive the relentless pressure of development. This bill would render those promises meaningless at the stroke of a corporate pen. The gallery, filled with Oak Ridge residents and farmers from across the state, erupted in applause despite the chairman's calls for order. Horizon's representatives countered with slick presentations about economic growth, job creation, and modernization. But their arguments rang hollow against the authentic passion of generational farmers fighting for their heritage. After 2 weeks of testimony, the bill was tabled for further study, a polite legislative term for indefinite postponement. We had won another round, though everyone understood the war would continue on other fronts in other ways. As we left the Capitol building, Michael surprised me by suggesting we invite William and Catherine Monroe to dinner at the farm to celebrate the victory. It's time to put the past behind us, Dad. Their testimony about Victoria's recruitment by Horizon helped sway the committee. We owe them that much. I studied my son, seeing a maturity that loss and betrayal had accelerated. You're right. Saturday night. Perfect. And Dad, he hesitated. I've been thinking about Victoria's letter. I waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. I'm not ready to forgive what she did. May never be, but I respect that she's trying to make amends in her own way. He looked out at the Capitol dome. The documentary, it took courage to expose herself like that, to admit her role in something so shameful. It did, I agreed. Courage runs in her family, it seems. Michael nodded thoughtfully. I'm going to write back, not to reopen anything between us, but to acknowledge her apology, to wish her well in her recovery. I think that's wise. I clasped his shoulder. Your mother always said bitterness makes a poor farming companion, takes up space where better things could grow. He smiled at the memory. She had a saying for everything, didn't she? And usually right on all counts. The dinner with William and Catherine went better than I'd expected. They brought Eleanor, now comfortably settled in the Miller Foundation's assisted living facility, her mind still sharp, though her body was failing. Michael prepared his mother's famous pot roast recipe, and we ate in the dining room rather than the kitchen, a small formality that acknowledged the occasion's significance. After dinner, as we sat with coffee and Catherine's homemade apple pie, Eleanor Monroe fixed me with a surprisingly direct gaze. You know, Robert, I watched that documentary Victoria made. Her voice was thin but clear. Couldn't believe that was my granddaughter admitting all those terrible things she'd done. It took courage, I acknowledged. Yes, but it took something else first, something harder. Eleanor set down her coffee cup with a slightly shaky hand. It took hitting rock bottom, losing everything she thought mattered. William nodded somberly. Victoria called us last week. First real conversation we've had in months. She's continuing with therapy, working on a follow-up documentary about rural revitalization efforts. She's staying with my sister at San Francisco, Catherine added, taking things one day at a time. Michael, who had been mostly quiet, finally spoke. I wrote to her, didn't say much, just that I acknowledged her apology and wished her well. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. That meant everything to her, Michael, more than you know. The conversation shifted to other topics. Eleanor's stories of Oak Ridge in the 1950s, William's work at the community college, Catherine's volunteer efforts at the local library. By the time they left, something had shifted. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition of shared humanity and the possibility of moving forward without the weight of unresolved anger. As I closed the door behind them, Michael leaned against the wall, expression thoughtful. You know what's strange? When Victoria and I first met, one of the things that attracted me was her passion for making a difference. She talked about using social media to highlight important issues, give voice to overlooked communities. And somewhere along the way, the platform became more important than the purpose. Exactly. He pushed away from the wall. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen with our rebranding. The new image has to serve the values, not replace them. I watch my son walk toward his office, shoulders straight and purposeful. From the ashes of his failed marriage, something valuable had emerged. A deeper understanding of what mattered and what didn't. Some lessons could only be learned through pain. Spring arrived with the familiar rhythms of planting season, though this year brought significant changes to Miller Farms, or Miller Legacy Farms as it was now officially known. Michael's organic expansion was underway, with new fields being prepared and specialized equipment delivered. The rebranding had launched with a modest local campaign emphasizing our commitment to sustainable agriculture and community investment. What we hadn't anticipated was the level of media interest generated by the conservation easement battle in Victoria's documentary. Requests for interviews and features came from agricultural journals, business magazines, and even a national news program doing a segment on rural America's evolution. This is an opportunity, Michael argued, as we reviewed the latest batch of requests, a chance to shape the narrative about the future of family farms, show that we're not stuck in the past, but actively building something sustainable for the next generation. I was more cautious. Media attention can be a double-edged sword. Once you invite them in, you lose control of the story. Then we need to be clear about the story we want to tell. Michael laid out a media strategy that was selective and purposeful, focusing on outlets that reach potential customers, investors, and policymakers rather than general interest publications. I had to admit it was well thought out. Your mother was the media-savvy one in the family. She would have approved of this approach. With careful consideration, we accepted 3 interview requests of a feature in Modern Farmer about our organic expansion, a profile in Iowa Business Monthly focusing on rural entrepreneurship, and a segment on a national Sunday morning program about the conservation easement movement we'd sparked. The Modern Farmer piece came out first, beautifully photographed and thoughtfully written. The journalist captured the balance we'd struck between innovation and tradition, noting how our operation had evolved while staying true to its roots. Orders for our organic products spiked immediately after publication, validating Michael's market projections. The Iowa Business Monthly profile positioned us as forward-thinking rural entrepreneurs rather than traditional farmers, highlighting the complex business operations behind our agricultural facade. This too brought unexpected benefits. Inquiries from potential investors interested in supporting similar sustainable agriculture ventures. But it was the national television segment that truly changed the conversation. Filmed partly in our fields and partly in the historic town hall, it presented the Oak Ridge Agricultural Trust as a potential model for rural communities facing development pressure across America. The Miller approach represents a third way, the correspondent concluded, neither rejecting progress nor surrendering to external development agendas, but instead charting a self-determined course that honors agricultural heritage while embracing sustainable innovation. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Calls and emails poured in from farmers' community organizations and local officials across the country, all asking the same essential question: how can we do this in our town? James, ever practical, saw the business opportunity immediately. You should create a consulting division, help other communities establish their own agricultural trusts and conservation strategies. That wasn't the goal, I protested. We were just protecting our own community. And now you have the chance to help others do the same. James leaned forward across my desk. This could be the next evolution of the Miller legacy, Rob. Not just preserving Oak Ridge, but helping preserve rural communities everywhere. The idea took root and grew as ideas tend to do when their time has come. Michael embraced it enthusiastically, seeing both purpose and potential. By early summer, we had established the Rural Preservation Alliance, a nonprofit consultancy that would help communities create their own customized versions of the Oak Ridge model. Horizon Global, meanwhile, had shifted their focus to more receptive communities, though industry insiders reported that CEO Jonathan Caldwell still spoke bitterly about the Oak Ridge situation in private meetings. Their stock had recovered from the initial hit, but their reputation had suffered lasting damage from Victoria's expose and the failed legislative maneuver. In June, as the first crops of the season neared harvest, Michael approached me with an unexpected proposal. I think we should invite Victoria to document the Rural Preservation Alliance launch. I looked up from the equipment maintenance report I'd been reviewing, caught completely off guard. You can't be serious. Hear me out. He sat across from me, expression earnest. Her first documentary helped us win the legislative battle. She has credibility now as someone who's seen both sides, corporate development and rural preservation. Having her tell this story would reach an audience we otherwise couldn't access. Have you considered how awkward that would be for everyone involved? Of course, but this isn't about personal comfort. It's about maximizing impact. He leaned forward. Her followers aren't farmers or policymakers. They're young urbanites who've never thought about these issues. Exactly the demographic we need to educate if we want lasting change. I studied my son, impressed despite my reservations. He was thinking strategically, putting the mission above personal feelings. You've really thought this through. I have. And yes, it would be uncomfortable, but sometimes discomfort is the price of progress. It was impossible not to hear Sarah's voice in those words. She had always been the one pushing me past comfortable boundaries, challenging me to consider the bigger picture. All right, I conceded. Reach out to her. But be clear about expectations and boundaries. This is a professional arrangement, nothing more. Already drafted the email. Michael pulled out his phone, showing me a carefully worded message that was cordial but businesslike, clearly outlining the proposed project and its parameters. I read it twice, then nodded. Send it. Victoria's response came within hours, professional, appreciative, and notably lacking any attempt to leverage the opportunity for personal reconciliation. She expressed interest in documenting rural preservation efforts as part of her ongoing work, exposing corporate development tactics, attaching a formal proposal outlining how she would approach the project. After careful review and consultation with James about necessary legal protections, we agreed to move forward. Victoria would come to Oak Ridge in August to film the Rural Preservation Alliance's inaugural workshop, which would host representatives from 12 communities across the Midwest interested in implementing similar protection strategies. When the day arrived, I found myself unexpectedly nervous. Victoria would be accompanied by a small film crew, a protective buffer that would keep interactions professional, but still, this would be the first time Michael had seen his estranged wife in nearly a year. She arrived with minimal fanfare, her appearance notably different from the polished influencer who had once mocked our poverty museum farmhouse. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair, replaced by practical work attire in a simpler, more authentic presentation. She greeted me with a formal handshake, an appropriate deference, her eyes meeting mine only briefly before focusing on the work at hand. Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Miller. I appreciate your willingness to work with me despite our history. The mission matters more than personal history, I replied, echoing Michael's sentiment. Your documentary work has proven valuable to the cause. Her interaction with Michael was similarly restrained, professional acknowledgement without any attempt to resurrect personal connection. Whatever emotions swirled beneath the surface, both maintained the boundaries we'd established. Over the 3 days of filming, I observed Victoria working with focused intensity. She conducted interviews with visiting farmers and community leaders, captured footage of our sustainable farming practices, and documented the workshop sessions where the Rural Preservation Alliance team shared legal strategies and organizational frameworks. On the final evening, as the visitors gathered for a celebratory dinner in the barn, now renovated as a meeting space, I found Victoria filming alone from the loft, capturing the scene of rural leaders from across the Midwest, sharing ideas and building connections. Getting what you need, I asked, climbing the stairs to join her. She lowered her camera. Yes, it's a powerful visual, people taking control of their community's futures instead of waiting for external forces to determine their fate. That's the heart of it, isn't it? Self-determination. She nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. I owe you an apology, Mr. Miller. Another one, I mean. Oh, I didn't understand what I was helping destroy. When Horizon hired me, I saw farms like yours as relics, outdated, inefficient, holding back progress. She gestured toward the gathering below. I never saw the communities, the connections, the knowledge built over generations. I never understood what was really at stake. Most people don't until it's too late. That's what this documentary needs to show. Not just the tactics developers use, but what's truly at risk when they succeed. She turned to face me directly. I want to thank you for allowing me to be part of this project. I know it couldn't have been an easy decision. It wasn't my decision alone. Michael saw the strategic value in your participation. Victoria's expression softened at the mention of her estranged husband. He always was the better strategist between us. I was all tactics and short-term thinking. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. He seems good, centered. I'm glad. He's found his purpose. That tends to center a person. She nodded, a flicker of genuine regret crossing her face before she composed herself. I should get back to work. The light's perfect right now for these overhead shots. I left her to her task, reflecting on the strange circles life sometimes traveled. The woman who had once sought to tear down our legacy was now helping document its evolution and expansion. Not redemption exactly, but perhaps a form of restoration, using her skills to build rather than destroy. The documentary, released 3 months later under the title Roots: The Fight for Rural America's Future, exceeded all expectations. Victoria's unique perspective as a former corporate scout turned advocate gave the film unusual credibility and reach. It was selected for several film festivals, aired on a streaming service, and became required viewing in university courses on sustainable development and rural policy. More importantly, it generated concrete results. Inquiries to the Rural Preservation Alliance tripled. State legislators from across the country requested information about implementing similar protections. Even federal officials took notice, with a congressional committee inviting Michael to testify about rural preservation strategies during Farm Bill deliberations. By the film's release, Victoria had moved to Minneapolis to work with a nonprofit documentary collective focusing on environmental and rural issues. Our communication remained limited to professional matters. Occasional emails about the film's impact or clarification of factual details for articles and interviews. The personal wounds were too deep for true reconciliation, but a mutual respect had emerged from the ashes of betrayal. Michael, meanwhile, had found unexpected happiness in his new focus. The organic expansion had exceeded even his optimistic projections, with demand for Miller Legacy products growing steadily. The rebranding had attracted attention from high-end restaurants and specialty markets across the Midwest, creating new revenue streams and opportunities. More surprisingly, he had begun seeing Anna Peterson James's daughter, who had returned to Oak Ridge after completing her MBA to help manage her father's expanding practice. Their connection had developed naturally through their work on the Rural Preservation Alliance, built on shared values and complementary strengths. On a crisp October evening, almost exactly a year after the charity gala that had exposed Victoria's deception, Michael and I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the fields in golden light. "Anna's helping me look at properties," he said casually, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Properties." I kept my tone neutral, though a flutter of concern rose in my chest. "Looking to move off the farm." He laughed. "No, never. But the divorce is final now, and I'm thinking about the future. A place of my own on the property. Maybe that ridge overlooking the east field." Relief washed through me, followed by understanding. He wasn't leaving the land, just establishing his own space within it. Another step in the natural evolution of the Miller legacy. The ridge would be perfect. Good drainage, morning sun, enough distance for privacy, but close enough for convenience. I tried to keep my voice matter-of-fact, though my heart swelled with something between pride and gratitude. "Your great-grandfather originally wanted to build there before deciding on this spot." "I didn't know that." Michael seemed pleased by the connection. "It feels right somehow." "It is right." I watched the last sliver of sun disappear behind the distant tree line. "You know, your mother and I always hoped you'd find someone who understood what this place really means, who saw beyond the surface to the legacy beneath. Anna gets it. Her family goes back almost as far as ours in Oak Ridge. Different kind of work, same kind of roots." He was quiet for a moment. "I almost lost sight of what mattered, Dad. Got caught up in Victoria's vision of success. The status, the appearances. We all get distracted sometimes. The important thing is finding your way back." He nodded, contemplative. "You know what's ironic? Everything Victoria wanted, influence, recognition, making a mark, she's actually achieving now. But through honesty instead of deception, building instead of tearing down. Some people need to lose everything before they can figure out what really matters." I thought of my own journey, the lessons learned through Sarah's illness and death, the priorities clarified through Victoria's betrayal. Loss has a way of stripping things to their essence, which farm. Michael was silent for a while, processing this truth. Finally, he stood stretching against the evening chill. I should head in. Early meeting tomorrow with that restaurant group from Chicago. Before you go, I said, reaching into my pocket, I have something for you, been waiting for the right moment. I handed him a small velvet box weathered with age. Inside was my grandmother's engagement ring, a modest diamond in a handcrafted gold setting. Dad, I haven't even... I know, it's just for when, if the time comes. I closed his fingers around the box. No pressure, just wanted you to have it. Sarah would have wanted Anna to have it someday. His eyes glistened in the fading light as he carefully tucked the box into his pocket. Thank you for everything. After he went inside, I remained on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched over 5 generations of Millers working this land, each facing their own challenges, each finding their own way to preserve and extend the legacy. Victoria had been right about one thing: generational wealth is real. But its truest form isn't measured in bank accounts or property deeds. It's measured in resilience, in adaptation, in the values that sustain a family through good times and bad. As for the farm itself, the land that Victoria had dismissively called a poverty museum, it had proven its worth in ways no balance sheet could capture. Not just in the crops it yielded or the revenue it generated, but in the community it anchored and the purpose it provided. Authentic wealth, working quietly, building slowly, serving faithfully across generations. No social media campaign could ever capture its true value, but those who understood needed no explanation. The Oak Ridge Agricultural Trust was now protecting over 30,000 acres across the county. The Rural Preservation Alliance was working with communities in 7 states. Miller Legacy Farms had become a case study in sustainable agricultural entrepreneurship. And Michael was preparing to build his own home on the family land, continuing the cycle for another generation. Not bad for a stubborn old man's dirt farming museum. I smiled into the darkness, a deep contentment settling in my bones. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, and there would always be challenges, tonight I could rest in the knowledge that what we'd built together would endure. The Miller legacy was secure not because we had hidden it away or protected it from change, but because we had allowed it to grow and evolve while remaining rooted in what mattered most: the land, the community, and the values that had sustained us for 100 years. Some things change, some things shouldn't. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. As I finally rose to go inside, I whispered the words my father had written so long ago on that faded photograph. Remember what matters. We had remembered, and in remembering we had prevailed.